My name is Deborah. I'm 65 years old. How? I've been a widow for 10 years, and, as ironic as it may seem, I still teach young people to fight. But no one has ever taught me how to react when pain comes from one's own family's door. Tell me something. What would you do if you found your daughter shivering at Christmas while her family laughed by the fireplace? I know. It sounds like something from a poorly written movie, but I lived it, and to this day, I can't forget the feeling of seeing my daughter, my Emily, with purple lips and lost eyes, outside a house full of lights, laughter, and toast, as if she were a forgotten piece of furniture in the backyard. Maybe you're here because you've felt that pain too, of giving everything for someone and one day being treated like nothing. Or maybe you just want to understand how a woman like me got to the point of seeing her own daughter being discarded as a broken piece. Well, I'll tell you. By the end of this story, you will understand what really happened that night. You'll understand what made me cross that door, and why. I learned too. After that Christmas, I was never the same again. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There was a moment that night when everything stopped. The laughter came from inside. No gone. The glasses clinked with expensive champagne, and I, outside, found my daughter sitting on a wooden chair, with her shoulders shaking, without a coat, without color on her lips. When I hugged her, her body was cold, and the 6 words I said there, holding her in my arms, changed everything. No one screamed. Nobody broke anything. But it was the end of a lie. It's the beginning of something they never imagined. If you've made it this far, on the count of my star, I ask you one thing. Stay with me. I know this story is not easy to tell, and God only knows how many times I swallowed this cry in silence. If this story moves you in any way, if it reminds you of someone, or even yourself, leave a like, subscribe, not out obligation, but as a gesture of company, because there are wounds that only heal when we see that we are not alone. And today, more than ever, I need to know that I am not. It had been almost a year since I had seen my daughter. Her last messages were short, spaced out, eternity, don't the nice, real sister do. Always saying that I was tired, busy, out of time, but deep down, my mother's heart knew there was more behind it. That's why, on December 24th, I packed my suitcase, bought a bus ticket to Seattle, and from there took a taxi to Boise. I didn't say anything. I didn't warn anyone. I wanted it to be a surprise, one of those good surprises, which we imagine will get a smile and a tight hug. I took with me a simple gift, an album of old photos that I put together with affection myself. There was the first trip we took together, the photo of the day she lost her first tooth, and even our favorite handwritten apple pie recipe from the time when she still called me Cookie Mom. My idea was just this: to sit next to her, toast with a hot tea, and listen to her laughter again. I didn't want luxury, only presence. The taxi dropped me off at the beginning of the street. The neighborhood was beautiful. One of those big houses with well-kept balconies. But something bothered me as soon as I went downstairs. No decorations outside. No flashing lights. No garlands on the door. Not even a welcome bell. Just the muffled sound of music coming from inside, mixed with voices and laughter. Ah. I walked slowly to the sidewalk. The night was cold. No, much more than I imagined. My knees hurt, as they always do when snow starts to form on the ground. But it wasn't just the cold that was tightening. It was a different squeeze, as if something inside my chest was already trying to warn me. When I got close to the side window, the one that overlooked the dining room, I stopped. It was like getting punched. Inside, now was here, now. The table was full. There was roast turkey. I lit candles, now wine glasses, and everyone laughing. Ryan's father, Eddie, his sister, Einlunton, his mother, not even friends of the couple, all very well dressed, toasting, eating, laughing. It was a perfect Christmas scene, one of those that we only see in margarine advertisements. But my daughter wasn't there. Monsieur, I thought she was in the room. Maybe getting ready. Maybe waiting for someone to knock on the door. But something made me look away. And that's when I saw it. Monsieur come. In the corner of the porch, almost hidden behind a large plant, was her. Stepped on, huddled in a wooden chair, Leo, her arms crossed over her body, with a blouse too thin for the cold. It was, her hair wet with snow, the shoulders trembling, and a look so lost, so empty, that it made me freeze from the inside out. I ran to her without thinking. Well, I took off my coat and wrapped it around. Emily, my God, daughter, hen, one deal, this. What is this? I whispered. No. She looked at me as if waking up from a nightmare. She tried to smile. How did she ride? But her lips barely moved, and before I could say anything else, she passed out in my arms. At that moment, I froze. Sumo, I'm standing Alantown, who trained so many athletes, who have held girls falling in pain on the mat, who was strong. Even the day I buried my husband, I trembled. Because it wasn't just her body that was cold. It was the soul. No, there is pain that we don't feel at the moment. They stay there, dormant, hidden under the skin. But when we see a child hurt like this, rejected, now, it is as if everything awakened at once. Abandonment. The guilt. The city sure cow. The fear of having failed. And it was at that moment that I thought, how many mothers have gone through this? How many have seen their children erased, by the cruelty of those who promised love. If you've ever experienced something similar, or if those words touched some wound inside, when she writes in the comments, I've lived it or it touched me, because sometimes what we need most is to know that someone understands what we feel. I held my daughter in my arms, right there, in the middle of the balcony, with the snow falling on us. The music kept playing inside. Her mother-in-law's laughter seemed to mock the silence that formed between me and Emily. And what hurt me the most, it's just that no one noticed. No one came to see. No one wondered where the lady of the house was. And it was there, with her in my arms. That you not how, unparonanchao, waited to where, ni saw it. I didn't know what I was going to find. Leos Kai. I didn't know what I was going to hear, but one thing was certain. Who made my daughter tremble like that? He is going to hear my voice. But what happened when I knocked on that door? Who received me? And what did I hear when I entered? How? Believe. No. You still don't know the worst part. I went in. I didn't hit. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't announce my presence. I pushed the door open with one hand, while the other held Emily close to my chest. It was like carrying the little version of her. That little girl who once cried because she fell off her bike. But this time, it wasn't a scratch on her knee. It was something much deeper. The room was lit with yellow lights, decorated with Christmas details that looked like they came out of a magazine. The glasses sparkled. The smell of hot food filled the air. And the voices were loud, cheerful. No, the nastinter, and the sick child, almost euphoric. Children ran among the adults, and someone laughed out loud at a joke that escaped. A fragile woman is like a broken doll. She takes up space, and no one knows what to do with her. No one noticed my presence right away. I was there, standing there, with the snow still on my shoulders. My daughter passed out in my arms, and my heart beating like a drum, until her mother-in-law, Evelyn, saw me. She held a glass of champagne and wore an emerald green dress, too expensive for those who empty themselves inside. She froze for a second, like someone who sees a ghost. Deborah, he said, half laughing, half embarrassed. You around here? What a surprise. Behind her, and Zelkarfen, Halkoidintan, Harsiginhelm. Ryan appeared with an expression between embarrassment and discomfort. What's going on? He asked, looking at Emily as if he saw a wet cat at the door. She was outside. Ryan? I replied in a low but firm voice, sitting in the snow, trembling and a cow. He shrugged, as if talking about time. She wanted to get out. She said she needed some air. No one moved. No one took a blanket. A cow. No one asked if she was okay. Ryan's mother turned her back. One of the children asked if the party was going to stop. And there was to cut. And the Zimchu, Abigail, and the sister-in-law. And he's made her sister-in-law, commented quietly. Oh, always with these scenes. Drama at Christmas has become a tradition. I put Emily on the nearest couch, took off her snow-stained boots, and walked over to the fireplace. I took a blanket and covered it. Then I looked around. One, aha, a whole table of people who said they were family, and no one had noticed that the owner of the house was missing. No one noticed the absence of the woman who prepared that entire dinner, who had spent the last few days crying in the room. As I would learn later, I stood there for a moment, listening to the wood crackling on the fire and the laughter of the children coming back, as if nothing had happened. And in that silence between a sip of wine and cruel indifference, I realized my daughter had not just been forgotten, it had been erased, as if it were a nuisance, a mistake, a burden. Ah, I touched her face, which was beginning to regain its warmth. Ah, fire! She opened her eyes for a second and whispered, "Oh, Mommy," uh, with that tone that seems to come from a place that is not here. I held his hand. The one not I held his hand. Her skin was rough, cold, paper thin. My little girl was withering inside, and no one there seemed to see. Or worse, maybe they would see, and they didn't care. Emily has always been delicate. Yes, but never weak. And seeing her like this, so small, on that big sofa, broke me in two. Evelyn came with a cup of tea, perhaps to look solicitous, perhaps to ease her own conscience. She gets like that sometimes, he said, Lorita, in a tone of someone who speaks of a spoiled child. Since losing that baby, dunno, it became unstable. I stared at Evelyn with the eyes of someone who buried her husband, raised a daughter alone, held the bar and still found the strength to train champions. How? So, up you together. She lost 4. Evelyn, 4. Banded in Sutama. High knuckled me. And he still lives with those who make fun of broken dolls. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, but I stood up. Nary soon cow. I scanned the room. Every averted look, every yellow smile, every person who started eating again as if I were invisible. All that was entering me like a dull knife. And I just thought, how did they let it get to this point? How did no one notice? Or did they realize? And did you think it was normal? I didn't scream. I was never one to scream. But something inside me began to boil, a clean, almost sad anger that seeks no revenge, but justice. And it was there, with her on the couch, surrounded by faces that didn't know what love was, that I made a decision. Whoa, I wasn't leaving. I wasn't going to disappear again. And they would still listen to me. Ah, but what were these people hiding? Why so much contempt? So much coldness? I still didn't know. But something told me that that scene on the balcony was just the beginning. I stood there, now, next to the fireplace, with Emily still half asleep on the couch, watching that house as if looking at a stage full of fake characters. Each one there had a mask of joy, of elegance, of civility. But it only took a moment of silence for me to hear what was behind the curtains. Ryan walked away from the living room and went to the kitchen. Evelyn followed, and soon after, Abigail. I went after it. I stood in the hallway, near the half-open door. New to my not sincere and I. They spoke quietly, thinking that no one was listening. But I listened. I listened. She keeps locking herself in her room, pretending she's depressed. Ryan said, "Whoa, cow," with that mocking tone that made me cringe. I can't stand this woman crying anymore because of babies that didn't even exist. It's over. No, I nodded. It's been a while. Evelyn added, "No, no," with the coldness of someone who cuts raw meat. If it's not good for having children, you should at least know how to cook. But not even that. It only serves to disturb the supper. And then came Abigail's muffled laughter. That dry, poisonous giggle. Like someone who feeds on the pain of others. Each word was like a knife entering slowly. It wasn't just contempt. It was dehumanization. My daughter was not seen as a person in there. It was a nuisance, a noise, a dead weight, as they themselves said. And at that moment, every fell into place. Her disappearances, the short answers, his eyes sunken on video calls, the calls in which she said it's okay. Mom, the voice that asked for help. News, it wasn't drama. It was not an exaggeration. It was abuse. It was emotional, psychological abandonment. It was veiled cruelty. Well done, and served on expensive plates on linen tablecloths. And I remembered every penny I sent her when I said that health was hard. I remembered the times when she talked about tiredness, medicines, attempts to get pregnant that never worked. I remembered a day, 3 years ago, when she called me crying because she lost her second baby, and Ryan wasn't home, and no one went with her to the hospital. And in here, town, far away, without knowing that this was just the beginning of the erasure. No, Anya, there are things that we only notice when we hear without being seen. And in that hallway, Siri, I saw who they really were. Ryan's smile. No, I did not. Evelyn's elegant posture. My. Abigail's rehearsed friendliness. All lies. People who shine in public, but erase those who shine in silence. I slowly returned to the living room. I looked at my daughter. My cane. One night it seemed to what? They turned it in so I foresaw. Still sleeping. The skin is more flushed now, thanks to the warmth of the fireplace and the blanket. But his eyes were still sad, even with his eyes closed. And it was there, sitting next to her. That I understood. It was not just a visit. It wasn't just a Christmas. That was a rescue. And I wasn't going to go home without her. But how do I get my daughter out of a prison that no one sees? How to free someone who no longer knows that he is chained? These questions kept hammering in my head until the moment I heard one last sentence coming from the kitchen, one that changed everything. But this, you need to listen to me, the way I did, because that's when everything started to fall apart. I remember to this day the temperature of the doorknob when I touched my hand. Well, cold, smooth, now, sharp. It's true, but it seems that there was fire in my veins. I knocked on the door hard, and in less than 5 seconds, Evelyn opened it. He held a glass of red wine, his fingers full of rings, the most fake smile I had ever seen in my entire life. Well, Deborah, nice, well now, Monsieur Monsieur Picard. What a surprise, she said, numb, as if I were an inconvenient neighbor and not the mother of the woman who was there, in my arms, fainting from the cold. Emily felt bad. He went out to get some air. Everything is under control. Everything under control. That's what she said. But what I saw was the opposite. It was abandonment. It was negligence. And it was contempt. Ryan appeared behind her, leaning against the door frame as if he were a sullen teenager. She keeps doing this, he said, rolling his eyes. This time, he decided to freeze outside. Go figure. I didn't answer. Entered. Wow. Simple as that. Wow. I passed them as if entering their own house. I put my daughter on the couch, adjusted the pillows, took off her wet shoes, and wrapped her with a blanket I found in an armchair. The warmth of the fireplace contrasted violently with the coldness of the gazes around me. The talks gradually ceased. The guests noticed my presence. Some disguised their discomfort. Others picked up their cell phones as if they had something urgent to do. And there, in the middle of that perfect room, with the lights of the tree flashing and the gifts organized by size and color, I looked straight into Ryan's eyes. He smiled, Monsieur, still mocking. Now, did you shout? But his eyes were no longer in control. And it was at that moment that I said, her voice was low, paused, but so firm that even the fire in the fireplace seemed to go down. Is this how you treat her? Time froze. The silence was so brutal that you could hear the ice at the bottom of the glasses. The wine slowly flowed from Evelyn's glass and fell onto the beige carpet. No one moved. No one blinked. And at that moment, I was no longer the polite lady they knew from old photos. I was a mother. And a wounded mother is silence charged with a storm. Ryan tried to laugh, but the laugh died in the middle. You don't understand. Deborah, no now. I stay home. Emily has crises. He moves away. He doesn't want help. It closes itself. I've been trying. I shook my head. Well, like someone who listens to an old lie, repeated with new makeup. Tempted? You tried to let her freeze to death outside. He tried to pretend that she wasn't shaking. He tried to forget that it exists. He swallowed. Still. Evelyn interrupted, with that annoying tone of a woman who thinks she's still in control of the situation. She's dramatic. No. She always has been. No. He is doing this to get attention. Since she lost that baby, she has become a pitting of lament. She lost 4. I said this without raising my voice. and it was worse than if I had screamed. Evelyn turned pale. "No, what do and second supper." Ryan looked away. Abigail got up and went to the kitchen, as if the tea in the teapot was more urgent than anything. "Why," I continued, "why, she is not dramatic. She is sick. She's wounded. Ah." And you laughed as she froze outside. It was then that Emily woke up, softly, slowly. "Ah," he whispered, "Mother," and tried to sit down. "Ah." I held her calmly. I held her calmly. She looked around, confused, as if returning from a dark place and finding the face of someone who thought she had left. "Everything is fine now, daughter. This, im here, and sit on us," I said. "How?" And I saw a tear flow from her eyes. It was there that the room lost all its decoration, because it doesn't matter how much they adorn, how much they perfume, how much they hide. Then how, when the truth comes in, how it opens everything up. And am here, telling this with a heavy heart, remembering every second. If you're still with me this far, if this story is beating in some corner of your chest, leave a like on this video. What on this video? Subscribe to the channel. Because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. There are things that only a mother feels, and there are pains that only those who have been through it understand. You're not alone, and neither did I. And in that tense silence, before anyone tried to explain themselves, Emily said something that made me look at her as if it were the first time. Something, she whispered softly, but that ignited a spark inside me, because now, at that moment, I realized that she didn't just want to be held. She wanted to leave. But how to free someone who has already become accustomed to prison? That's what you'll understand in the next part, because it was at that moment that everything started to turn. I stood there, sitting next to the sofa, holding my daughter's hand as if trying to hold back time. Her skin was already starting to warm up again, but her eyes, his eyes were still cold. No, not temperature, of absence, as if part of it had been lost somewhere and had not yet returned. As I adjusted the blanket over his legs, the memory dragged me back, and when we are a mother, all it takes is a touch, a smell, a silence, and everything comes back. I went back to that first phone call. It was a gray morning. I remember it well. She called me crying, saying that she had lost my occupation. It was the first baby. There were names on the table. He had plans, and suddenly, there was nothing left. I held the phone with one hand, and with the other, I just squeezed my chest, because I couldn't hold her. I couldn't hug him. You could only hear it. Then came the second, a year later. No time. One more call. Near and SAC2. One more cancelled ultrasound. No. One nameless pain. Emily didn't say much. He just said, This time, I thought I would. And he cried softly, no, as if apologizing for having hope. The third was even worse. She didn't even call me on the day. It was Ryan who sent a dry message. She's lost again. No, it's going to take some time. That tore me apart in a way I can't explain. Not for him, how, but for her, knowing that my daughter was living all this alongside someone who treated the loss as if it were a flight delay. And the fourth was the one that almost took her along. I don't know what hurt more. There's more. Seeing my daughter burying dreams 4 times, or realizing that, with each loss, she became quieter, low, as if apologizing for existing, as if her pain bothered even those who said they loved her. I remember when she was a little girl. I ran around the kitchen with flour on my face, laughing out loud, making apple pie with me. He said that one day he would have 3 children, one with my name, another with his father's, and one that she was yet to invent. Well, Emily was too sweet for the world, and maybe the world felt it. Maybe that's why he tried to silence her, and he succeeded. Oh, Ryan wasn't like that at first. On the day of the wedding, not in you or Sue, he looked me in the eye and said, I promise to take care of her. I believed it. He was polite, intelligent, knew I know how, kind. But there are people who learn to use kindness as a mask. And when that mask falls, what is left? Indifference. Today, looking at him standing there, silent, staring at me as if I were the problem, I could only think, how many moments did she live alone inside this house? How many nights have you cried on your pillow while he slept, as if nothing was happening? Emily, dear, I sit down. Oh, dear. My daughter, who said good morning even to the bird. Today she didn't even have the strength to keep her eyes open. And all this at Christmas, the date she loved the most, the only time of the year when she insisted that I visit. There will be a fireplace. Mom, Mom, there will be light on the balcony. Mom, there will be supper and laughter. And look what happened. Ah, he had contempt. There was silence. He was cold. I know. But there, nice, I'm sitting here, how, sitting on that couch, with her breathing slowly and her eyes teary. I felt something born inside me, a decision that did not yet have a name, but that already had a shape. I wasn't going back to Seattle. I wasn't going to leave that house with my head down. I was going to do what every mother does when she sees her child in danger. Protect and, maybe, retaliate. Ma. But how do you face an entire family that lives on appearance? How do you expose the truth without further destroying those who are already in pieces? I didn't know yet. But soon, very soon, someone would show me. Ryan returned to the room with the arrogance of someone who thinks he is still in charge. He passed us with the glass in his hand, his face red with wine and vanity, and stopped right in the center of the room, as if he were the owner of the show. I didn't want to bow, as you can. Look what became tonight. Huh? He said out loud. Learn to I did judge J. Gill, laughing to himself. Oh, drama. Sitting there, wonder that's to boy talking. Always drama. Do you think I'm not tired? I work all day. I support this house. And what do I get in return? A woman who lives on medicine and pity. Nobody said anything. Neither did Evelyn. Neither did Abigail. Neither did his father. Mr. Whitlock just stared, with that look of an old retired judge who thinks that everything is a case of silence and posture. But I could only feel Emily's hand squeezing mine, and that squeeze said it all. It was fear. It was shame. It was sadness, but it was also a request. Don't let go of my hand. No, Mom. And I didn't let go. Ryan continued. She's too fragile to live. It's not good for working. How can a horse sail when you're Sebastian? It's not good for having children, not even for talking. He only knows how to cry and lock himself in his room. I put up with it for years, out of pity, by appearance. But you know what? Maybe she likes to be a victim. He manipulates everyone with this poor thing. It was at this time that Abigail entered. She took his hook and added, Lee. Yes, she always had this melancholic side. I always wanted to be the center of attention. We plan a supper, and that's it. It disappears, becomes mute, ruins everything. Every year, it's like that. Evelyn let out a sigh and ran her hand through her hair. I've already said if she would at least cook, if she would do something useful. But not even that. The problem is that they raised her too spoiled. I looked at Evelyn. A hangout. Now, I'd see here. I looked right into her eyes, and she dodged. Because deep down, deep down, she knew. He knew that everything they said there was cowardice. But in that house, cowardice was a habit disguised as truth. Mr. Ironing Whitlock Lee, sitting in his leather armchair, folded his arms and did not move a muscle. He only said, No lamb, advance, calcard, and subject US Anawa. Maybe it was time to put an end to this theater. And that's when I understood. That family was a court. Emily, you wanted God, war soon. The silent reverse. Ryan, the accuser. Evelyn, house, the moral jury. Abigail, the audience that applauds, the fallen defendant. And the father, well, the judge who does not listen. Now, I see, only condemns with silence. But there was one thing they didn't know. I was there. And a mother does not watch her daughter being burned in a public square without getting up. Still, I kept quiet. On the outside, yes, but inside, my blood no longer flowed. It boiled. Emily turned her face. A tear flowed. Well, did ends. Well, aren't I stepfather? She cried silently. No, not of weakness, but of exhaustion. And, as she cried, Ryan, unrestrained, took another step, Do you want to know why I stopped touching you, Emily? Oh, no. Because you died inside. I lie next to an emotional corpse. It was there that I felt it. Something turned inside my chest. It was no longer pain. It was something else. Something that had no name. No, but had direction. It wasn't anger. It was a decision. And while he spat those words as if they were sacred truths, I didn't take my eyes off him, because I had seen this look before in men who break others from the inside, in people who say they love, but use love as a weapon. And here, I want to tell you something. If you've made it this far, stay a little longer. Yeah, I'm not in our case. I touch you on soda or some to see, because the most remarkable moment in this story is yet to come. There is a time when silence ceases to be cowardice and becomes a strategy. And when that happens, no one holds a mother upright. At that moment, Emily looked at me for the first time that night, with her eyes really open. It was not requested, it was delivery. She knew I was seeing everything. And there, why, the down, was it soon actually. In the exchange of that look, I swore to myself, no, she will never again sleep surrounded by people who want her dead inside. But how do you get someone out of invisible captivity? How do you break a chain made of contempt and emotional blackmail? That's what I discovered. There you. The instant a letter fell from the shelf, and everything began to change. I was about to get up to get a glass of water for Emily when I heard a noise at the back door, a dry beat, as if bumping into it unintentionally. I looked out the porch window and for a moment thought my mind was playing tricks. But it wasn't. Outside, standing near the snow-covered fence, was Jake Carson, one of my best students from the dojo days. He was only 11 years old when he first entered my academy, full of anger that his father had been arrested. He was small, slight, but he had a strength in his eyes that marked me. Today, he was there, in uniform. Traffic policeman, night patrol of Natal. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with that face of someone who understands everything without having to ask. I didn't say anything either. Calm, let you go. I just nodded. It was a small but loaded nod. He saw Emily on the couch, saw the uncomfortable silence of the room, the faces swerving, the analysis being filled as if nothing had happened. And I knew, at that moment, that there was a witness. Someone saw it. And see, changes everything. I went back to my daughter's side. She was more awake now. His eyes were still tired, but alive. Jake's out there. I said, no. He saw it. Emily didn't answer. No, but a sigh escaped. It was as if the air was slowly returning to her lungs, as if, after so long, someone saw her beyond the pain. Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail resumed the party as if they were actors forced to continue a poorly written play. The music played again. The smiles were forced again. The supper, Wainsio. once sacred, I now looked like a banquet over a cemetery. That's when I got up. Not in a hurry, not angry, but with a clarity that only those who have been hurt too much know. I went to the couch. Come with me, daughter. Liderinda. What's she now? Emily hesitated. Oh. He looked around as if asking permission, but I held his hand and repeated, Come, we will not run away. We're going to start. And here I want to open my heart to you who are there, listening to me. There are times in life when we realize that we no longer need to ask permission to leave the place where they only hurt us. That real love never makes us feel small. And when that happens, we go. And he goes with his head held high. If you've lived this moment, wow, comment below. Write it's true, or I understand you, because this conversation here is between people who feel deeply, and I know you feel it. I hugged my daughter firmly. Meow. She shivered slightly, no longer from the cold, but from doubt. But the feet moved. One step, then another, and together, when one town, we crossed that room as if crossing a minefield. No one tried to stop it. Ryan pretended not to see. Evelyn gave a yellow smile. Abigail whispered something in someone's ear. And me? I just walked with her, as I did when she was a child and was afraid to cross the street. We arrived at the door. Jake was still outside, stationary, steadfast, as if he had received an invisible calling. I knew he couldn't interfere, not at that moment, but his presence was like a message from the universe. You are no longer alone. I opened the door. The cold wind hit us again, but this time he looked like something else. I don't punish, but cleanliness. The snow fell slowly, as if it wanted to cover the tracks of that house. And when I stepped outside, with Emily by my side, one thing became clear. We weren't running away. We were being born again. But what would come after that departure? How to rebuild a woman who spent years being dismantled from the inside? That's what you need to see with me. Because it was the next day, no, right at dawn, that the real turning point began. We woke up early that morning, but the truth was that none of us had really slept. Emily spent the night in silence, lying on the sofa bed in my small apartment, with the blanket up to her chin and her gaze lost in a spot that didn't even exist. I sat next to her, not knowing whether to speak or just stay there. I chose to stay, because there are times when silence is all we have to offer. I made hot chocolate the way she liked it when she was a kid, with cinnamon and a little bit of vanilla. I took it to her, leaned the warm mug against her cold hands. She held it, but didn't drink. She just watched the steam rise as if it were smoke from a memory she no longer wanted to see. That was my daughter. The one who one day ran barefoot through the kitchen asking for more icing on the brownie. Who cried with laughter at silly jokes. Who was moved by Christmas commercials. Now, it was a present body with an exhausted soul. I sat slowly next to her and leaned my head against hers. I didn't say anything. I just breathed together. Sometimes, yeah, we don't need to save. You just need to sustain until the other reminds you that you can walk again. Later, oh, while she slept, I went to the window. The sun was beating down weakly among the buildings in Boise. My apartment was simple. Ah, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, antique furniture. Everything there had a story. The radio of my youth, the vase Emily gave me for her first paycheck, a picture of my husband in the hallway. I had little, but everything I had was true. Wah. And there, Wandis, on that worn floor, was where my daughter was safely. Wah. Or, at least, that's what I thought. Only it was close to noon that the intercom rang. When I answered, none. There was no answer. None. Just a quick squeak. Strange. I opened the door cautiously. Now we see tomorrow. And there, Wanyo, down on the floor of the hallway, carefully folded, now, was a piece of paper, a ticket, now, no subscription, no sender. They don't touch it, Tatis. Just one sentence written in thin, straight letters. Don't mess with the Whitlocks. I stood still for a while, with that piece of paper between my fingers, as if holding poison. The heart did not race. It was not fear. It was something else. It was that shiver that only comes when we realize that we are stepping on shifting ground. I took a deep breath, closed the door slowly. I didn't want Emily to hear it. I went back to the kitchen and put the note in the cutlery drawer. Then I went to wash the dishes, as if that would make the time return to normal. Later, hey, dahin, we thought fell. The phone rang. How? Private number. And the phone. And it is here. How touching ye. I answered with a firm voice. But what I heard was a low, slurred male voice. Mrs. Deborah? No. It would not be prudent to tamper where it was not called. Well, the Whitlock family has allies. Influential. Here, the house. Keep your daughter quiet. And so do you. The call dropped. And with her, something fell inside me, an old weight, but not unknown. I had felt this before, in the championships, when we faced opponents who played dirty, in sponsorship meetings, when they cut me off for being a woman, in life. Why, that feeling that you are just a stumbling block in the way of grown-ups. But even though it's stone, sometimes we make someone stumble. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. For the first time in many years, I felt fragile, not defeated, but fragile, because that war was not body against body. It was silence against influence. It was power against truth. And me? I only had an injured daughter, none. A cramped apartment and a past full of medals that were now useless. But right there, at the bottom of the well, with the shadow of threat hanging over us. I realized I still had one thing, one they could never take away from me. Time, pie. Because I learned that those who wait calmly see the enemy stumble alone. And they were relying too much on impunity. Emily woke up in the late afternoon. He looked at me and said, "Why now?" "Oh, jeez. Oh, do you think it will ever pass?" I held her hand with both of mine. "It will pass, because I'm going to be here. Oh, and because now someone saw it, and when there is a witness, daughter, now, you accept this system, okay. The world begins to change. But what I didn't know, it's just that the world was going to change faster than I imagined. Because that same night, an unexpected visitor knocked on my door, and it brought something that no one expected. The dawn came without asking permission, and with it, that silence that only those who have lived a lot know how to recognize. It was the kind of silence that doesn't weigh you down. He says, Emily slept curled up on the couch, her coat still covering her frail shoulders. Her face, despite her tiredness, seemed lighter, calm, as if the body knew that. For the first time in a long time, it was safe. I stood there, alone, standing in the hallway doorway, watching my daughter sleep as if she were a child again. I wondered how many times she dreamed of a place where she could just be, without being judged, measured, charged. And I wondered why it took me so long to realize what she was experiencing. But the guilt, if I let it, swallowed me up. And I couldn't let it, because Deborah, who trained on the mat, still lived in me. She had been quiet for years, withdrawn, nice, but alive. And there, in that instant, sitting at the kitchen table with a forgotten cup of tea by my side, my nice side, I began to do what I've always done best: plan. The difference is that this time the combat was silent, but every detail mattered. I took a deep breath. I took a box where I kept old documents, statements, receipts, copies of deposits, something that no one cares about until life asks for proof. I was calmly separating when, the transfers I sent to Emily when she said that the health plan no longer covered the exams. The receipt from the fertility clinic that I paid in her name, hidden from Ryan, the card bill on which she bought the antidepressants, paid in 6 installments because he refused to help. Each roll, a wound, a zion. Then came the voice messages. I had saved some. Not out of attachment, but because something told me, at the time, that no one would believe her pain if one day she decided to tell it. One of them began with a sob. And then, how? Mom, I can't do it anymore. You're switch to. Trying. He'd try. But he looks at me like I'm a living disappointment. I pressed play and cried quietly. It was not sadness. It was fuel. I opened my contact book, the old paper one, where I wrote down the names of people who passed through my life and left some debt, some unpaid favor. There he was. How? Peter Wallace, lawyer, knit how, need his sad. An old acquaintance from the times when I faced the Sports Federation in a dirty process that almost took me out of the academy. He defended me when no one wanted to. And I won. Years later, he told me, if you ever need me, call me. You saved my career. It was time to charge. Called. He answered the third call. The deep voice, still sleepy, now, but recognized my name immediately. Deborah? Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. Peter, my daughter, is in danger. Not blood, of soul. He did not ask for lengthy explanations. I just said, tell me what you need. I explained everything in detail, without flourishing, without dramatizing, only facts. He listened in silence, like a lawyer who knows that the strongest truth is the one that comes from within. In the end, he said, no, I needed Oxocard, won't say, and everything to me. We start now. But, Deborah, this will move powerful people. I smiled weakly. Peter, powerful people are those who protect, not those who threaten. The rest is noise. I hung up with my heart beating faster, not out of fear. Absolutely. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. No, take it easy. With method, I own, and rightly so. And if you've made it this far, listening to every bit of this story, listen to me a little more. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. No, it makes more difference than you think. There are people who just need a similar story to find strength. And I'm here to tell you mine until the end. That night, I went to sleep feeling something new. It was not revenge. It was protection with a first and last name. And when the day dawned, with the sky still gray and the branches frozen, I received a call that I didn't expect. It was from the hospital, and what they told me, made me get up in a hurry, because Emily, I was about to discover a truth that could change everything. The phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, finishing the papers with the notes from the early morning. On the other end of the line, Peter's voice sounded firm. We're going to need to organize everything by category. Financial evidence, health records, and most importantly, emotional evidence. He wasted no time. He had already activated a support team. He asked me to separate everything into folders, scan it, and send it by email. The more meticulous the material, the stronger the impact. And Deborah, this is not just a process. It's a warning for them and for her. I hung up with a lump in my throat. For the first time, I felt that pain was going to become a defense. That humiliation was going to stop being a secret and turn into justice. And justice, when it comes in silence, is the loudest sound there is. I called Jake right away. He answered from work. He told me that he had managed to record Christmas Eve. The street camera, positioned in front of the Whitlock's house, had captured the exact moment when Emily was sitting alone on the porch, shivering, while inside everyone was toasting. And, with the microphone of his uniform, he had recorded part of the conversation he heard. It was an I expected. He pledged to testify. Deborah, and they're not in town. I'd hear you so tatar. And I did a courtship auction. I owe you a lot. What I saw. It doesn't get out of my head. I can't pretend I didn't see it. His voice broke a little at the end. I took a deep breath. You saw it, Jake. And that changes everything. I took Emily to the clinic that same day. She resisted at first, but when we arrived and met Dr. Lindsay Green, something about her calmed down. Lindsay was a slow-talking, straight-looking woman. Now, I decided I generally show. He listened to everything carefully, asked delicate questions, took notes accurately. Now, after a long session, she called me to talk. Your daughter has a classic picture of severe depression. But there is something deeper. The trauma of pregnancy losses has not been treated, and the emotional neglect she experienced inside that house only deepened the wound. I listened in silence. Every word was a confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. Lindsay held my arm at the end. She will improve, but it will take time. And for that, she needs distance from everything that hurts. I asked her for a report. She promised, and I'm not going to soften anything. This needs to be said as it is. That night, we returned home in silence. Emily looked out the car window as if looking for another life, one in which everything was lighter. When we arrived, she asked me, "Do you think they're going to try to take everything away from me?" Mom? I held her hand. They have already taken everything. Daughter, now. I so outfashed a countess's illegal dot. Learn to you. Now, you're going to recover. Now. And you know, at this point in the story, if you've been here so far, I need to tell you one thing from the bottom of my heart. There's still something big to happen, because when we think we have reached the limit, life comes and shows that there is still one more hidden card. And it was at that moment, between reports, folders and recordings, that I understood. The game was not over. He was just getting started. And this time, I was the one who was going to make the rules. But how to face a facade empire with fragile evidence and an injured daughter? How to take down a respected name in Boise without looking like revenge? That's what I needed to find out, and fast. Because what Jake brought the next day changed the whole strategy, and he lit a fuse that no one could put out. It was cold that morning. But inside me what froze was not the weather. It was what I held in my hands, a folder with the statements of Emily's joint account with Ryan. which I had helped open years ago. I remember it as if it were today. She had her eyes full of hope and a shy smile. She said, "It's going to be good, Mom. Lives? Now we're going to start our real life." I believed it. I signed as a guarantor for the rent of their first apartment and made the first transfer, $5,000, money I had saved from the sale of my old car, a blue Mustang that accompanied me for almost a decade. Emily cried when she saw it. Mom, I didn't need to, but it did. It was my way of saying, go live. It will be happy. And there I was now, loading it to I still know. Years later, down towards Washington, looking at those cold numbers with burning eyes, Peter directed me to check the old receipts, and he found it. 3 high-value transfers, $5, 0, then $7, 800, 1, and finally $10, 200, sent from the joint account straight to an application in Abigail Whitlock's name, the sister-in-law, Han, the same one who laughed while Emily shivered from the cold on the porch. Her name appeared as a beneficiary in a private brokerage. This isn't just deviance, Peter said in a heavy voice. It's strategy. Nema, I understand it now. This is laundering family resources. They embezzled the money you donated to your daughter's health, and they applied in the name of another person in the family, with the intention of concealing. I felt a metallic taste in my mouth. The room turned a little. I leaned against the kitchen counter, but I stopped. Wow, the love I put into every penny, it was turned into profit by those who treated my daughter as a burden. Every exam she missed doing, every night she spent in pain, every appointment that was postponed, and the money was there. Surrendering in the name of the woman who despised her. It wasn't just negligence. It was calculation. It was cruelty with spreadsheets. Peter wrote everything down. We will include this in the process. This changes the weight of the action. It is misuse of resources intended for health and well-being, in addition to psychological abuse. We have fraud material and pact. I nodded, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. I went to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and held one of Emily's slippers in my hands. She still slept on the sofa in the living room, exhausted from the session with the therapist, and there, alone, I cried for the daughter I trusted in the wrong arms, for the money I thought was taken care of and became a weapon, for the girl who drew flowers in the letters she sent me from summer camp, saying, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to take care of people, just like you, and you who are listening to me so far. Let me ask you something. Has it ever happened to you to trust someone with everything you have and find out that they used it against you? Or remembering a gesture of love and realizing that it was treated like garbage? Sometimes a memory marks us in a way that nothing erases. If you've ever felt this, or know someone who has experienced something similar, write it here in the comments. Count even if it's just a sentence. Sometimes, sharing some of the pain is the beginning of healing. I took a deep breath. I dried my face. Emily needed all of me. I went back to the living room, put water to boil. I made lavender tea. Sister Marcel cock and tot on books. When I took it to her, she opened her eyes slowly. No. Are you better, daughter? She shook her head. Still weak. I discovered one more thing today. But you don't need to know now. She nodded confidently. For the first time, she looked at me as if to say, "You can take care of me." And I took care of it. No. Night came with the city in silence. I sat down at the table again. House. I separated the statements, made copies. Everything went into Peter's hand the next day. But something told me that it wasn't the worst yet. And I was right. Because the next morning, when I went to the market to get fresh bread, I found on the windshield of my car a brown envelope without a sender. Inside it, there was a picture, and in it, an image that would dismantle everything I thought about that wedding. I made the appointment on a Tuesday morning, in one of those old cafes that almost no one frequents anymore in downtown Boise. The place was between a second-hand bookstore and a closed tailor shop, and had been serving the same thin coffee for 30 years. It was the kind of environment where no one expects to see a scene. And that's exactly what I wanted. Not so. A confrontation without an audience. No audience, but with weight. I arrived first. I ordered a black coffee and sat down at the back table. I put on my simplest coat, tied my hair in a bun, and put on my reading glasses. Nothing there said a threat, but on the table rested the navy blue folder containing the statements, the medical records, Jake's audios, and Dr. Meono, Lindsay's report. Yes, each leaf there had a story, each piece of data, a pain that they pretended not to see. Ryan arrived 7 minutes later, with this swagger that was already as much a part of him as a tight tie. Evelyn came close behind, dressed with a studied elegance, but with restless eyes. They sat without greetings. I didn't even need to. The truth had already sat down first. Why all this theater? Deborah? Ryan said, pulling his chair with a bang. What is it, I'll try down. If I was going to make a scene, I could have called the newspaper. I took a deep breath. No. I opened the folder calmly. Now, I took the first sheet, the copy of the first deposit I made to their account in 2018. Then, the spreadsheet of deviations. And, finally, Emily's clinical report. Wow. Stamped and signed. I put it on the table. One by one. Like someone arranging pieces of a puzzle. I'm not here to threaten anyone. No, Tom. Ryan. Not even to beg for dignity. Tom. I just came to warn you. He gave a short, mocking laugh. Warn what? That you are going to sue us for being incompetent at home? Evelyn, and until then, silent, clutched the bag in her lap. His eyes scanned the papers. Wow. And I noticed. She already knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to understand that it was serious. You thought she was alone, weak, confused, unable, that he would not have the strength to react. But they forgot one thing. She has a mother. And it's still Kimoka. Oh no. My voice came out firm, low, but firm. And now she also has a lawyer. A police officer willing to testify. And a therapist who will present this to the courts. Ryan sat in his chair. The laughter disappeared. Evelyn still tried to hold the pose, but her shoulders were stiff, her lips quivering. Is this blackmail? She asked. No, this is the beginning, and am only here because I still believe that sometimes silence can teach more than scandal. They said nothing more. The waiter passed by asking if they wanted coffee. No, they dismissed it. I closed the briefcase as calmly as I had opened it. I got up from my chair, looked into their eyes, and said, Miriam, why? What do you not accept tonight? You built a castle-looking castle. But they forgot that even beautiful houses collapse from the inside. The difference is that now, everyone will hear the noise of the fall. I left the cafe without looking back, but I knew, because of the tension in their steps, for the heavy silence, for the way Evelyn held Ryan's arm as she left. They felt it. It wasn't screaming. It was not a scandal, but it was a blow. Silent, narious, a town, I will not city son, but accurate. And that same day, when I got home, I found Emily sitting on the porch of my apartment, with a blanket over her shoulders and a shy smile. You went there, right? She asked. I nodded. What now? I took a deep breath. Now, may I say, kind son to I one time. Daughter, say now, ladies howler. I'd say it's to metacoram. Now comes the part they least expect, and you'll see it with your own eyes. It took Emily 2 days to get out of bed after the conversation we had. She said she wasn't ready, that she was still shaking inside, as if fear had lodged in her ribs and she didn't want to leave. I didn't press it, but every morning he would put the cup of tea on the table, open the window of the sun, and say quietly, wow, whenever you want, it'll come with you. Now, on the 3rd day, she got up, sat on the edge of the sofa with her eyes lost, and said, What? Mom. I'm scared. How? But I don't want to live in fear anymore. And it was there that everything began to change. We went together to Peter's office. He was already waiting for us, with the papers ready. The divorce request cited emotional abuse, affective negligence, asset embezzlement, and omission in medical care. Emily could barely hold the pen. The hand trembled, but slowly, she signed once, twice, 3 times, and with each signature, no. It was as if she tore off a piece of the silence she had swallowed for years. Peter held the documents carefully. From now on, none of this is just between these walls. They will have to answer for every line. The news fell like a bombshell on the Whitlocks' home. It wasn't before 2 days, and the name Emily Whitlock appeared in a short online article in a local newspaper, with the discreet headline, "When woman files divorce petition against traditional Boise family. No scandal. Wow. Just a breath. But for those who live on appearances, one breath is enough to bring down pillars." Peter did not confirm the leak. I didn't even need to. I understood. Mom. It was his way of saying, they don't control the narrative anymore. In the same week, Mr. Harold Whitlock, a former judge known in the corridors of the court, tried to arrange a meeting with the judge in charge of the case. The information came to us through a contact from Peter. He tried to influence, but the process is already too visible to be erased. The phrase gave me peace. For the first time, they were surrounded, and we protected. Londau. Emily spent the next day lying down, exhausted. It was as if her body was finally believing that she didn't need to run anymore, that he could rest without looking back. I sat next to her, combed her hair slowly, as I did when she was little. And in that silence, I understood that justice begins like this, with small but firm gestures, with signed paper, with courage that barely stands upright, but gets up anyway. And when we came back from the registry office on that gray Friday, with our hands still cold and our hearts racing, Emily looked at me and said, "I see all. I didn't think I could do it, Mom, but it's strength. It seems to have passed for me." I smiled. "Annette Wade, she has always been yours. Daughter, I was just asleep now until now, the outside world was beginning to hear what had previously been just whispering. And they, the Whitlocks, who had always relied on prestige, were about to learn one thing. When a woman stands up, others get up together. And that's exactly what happened. When an anonymous letter arrived in the mail and exposed something no one expected, not even me. The courtroom that morning was cold, despite the heating. Too many people, too many looks, and a tension so dense in the air that it was difficult to breathe lightly. Me and Emily arrived early. She wore a blue sweater that I sewed myself years ago, when she was still trying for her first baby. She was thin, but firm, still tired. Yes, but with a new kind of look. It was no longer that of a broken woman. It was that of someone who, even wounded, now knew that she was now seen and protected. Jake was already waiting for us, with uniform, and sound, straight posture, engraver in hand. Showed to cigar. Peter arranged the documents in his briefcase, as if he were putting together a war map. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. On the other side, Evelyn had a rigid face. Ryan looked down at the floor, his hands crossed. No. Abigail? He wore an exaggerated fur coat, as if it were a disguise of power. But the eyes did not remain still. Peter stood up. No, I told. On our cities with a cow. Presented the material, gathered. And then he gestured to Jake, who handed the judge the USB stick with the recording. Your Excellency, we have here a sound evidence recorded on the night of December 24th, during the incident that gave rise to the present case. The recording was made legally by a law enforcement officer on patrol, and shows the real attitude of those involved in relation to the victim. The referee put on the headphones. The room was absolutely silent. Only the faint sound of the headset vibrating on the glass of the countertop could be heard. As he leaned over to hear better, wow. And then came the pause. The one that everyone feels when something is so disgusting that we even lose our breath. The judge looked up. Do you have copies for the defendant's legal representatives? Peter said, yes. Copies were distributed, one and down, and little by little, as the content became clear, the faces across the room began to change. Their mask finally began to crack. Abigail's voice, harsh, mocking. Emily's depression. She doesn't even have the strength to die. This poor thing. Evelyn's muffled laughter. Ryan's poisonous, dagger-like phrase. If she died soon, at least I'd have peace. And Evelyn's final whisper, charged with contempt. A dead weight? That's what it is. A weight that no one wanted to carry. In the back row, someone let out a "my God," and it wasn't from our family. The press, which until then had followed the case from a distance, now had its eyes and ears attentive. Local channel KTVB reported in the late afternoon. Recording reveals cruel insults by traditional family against woman undergoing psychological treatment. The next day, the video was in all the groups in the city. Evelyn became a meme. Abigail was removed from the luxury real estate chain where she worked. Ryan lost his sponsorship at the law firm. And Mr. Harold, the untouchable retired judge, was asked to step aside from the legal association indefinitely. I saw all this happen without raising my voice, without moving a muscle of joy. Just holding my daughter's hand, because when the truth comes out, justice does not need a spectacle. She just needs space. And if you're listening to me now, keep this phrase that sustains me to this day. There are lies that last for years, but only until the truth gains the courage to come out of hiding. And when she leaves, my God, how she screams. But it was not yet the end, because what happened next? Right there in the courtroom, no one expected. Not even Peter, not even me. Because of all the downcast faces on that bench, there was one who did not lower his eyes. And that face. I still had something to say. The judge's gavel struck with a dry sound. But to me, it echoed like thunder. Wow. Divorce granted. With guilt recognized for the defendant. The words came unhurriedly, and for an instant, Time seemed to stop. Went out. Emily took a deep breath. The tears came without warning. I shook her hand firmly. No, it was a small gesture, but full of everything a mother's heart can say without having to speak. Ryan was there, sitting a few feet from us, his gaze lost in an invisible spot. The same man who once raised glasses and fake smiles now seemed cowering inside his own suit. Evelyn, upon hearing the verdict, suddenly sprang to her feet, her chair dragging on the floor like a scream. "This is absurd," he said. Nearly down, his voice trembling more with wounded pride than with real indignation. The judge remained calm. "Maria, you can leave if you wish." And she left. He didn't look back. He didn't even look at his son. She just left. Hurriedly, Norville went out at home. The jump echoing down the corridor like a funeral march. The sentence determined. Most of the shared assets would remain with Emily. The main house, the car, and the joint applications. In addition, the fraudulent account in Abigail's name was blocked for investigation, with formal suspicion of money laundering. Abigail's face turned pale. Peter, with his sharp serenity, just put the papers in the briefcase. Whatever has been planted, one day blossoms, even what has been planted in lies. I heard this phrase and kept it to myself, because it was true. What they did to my daughter had been planted coldly, cultivated in silence, and now it was time harvesting. In the following days, the consequences came quickly, almost mercilessly. Evelyn disappeared from Boyce's social life. No one called her to charity events or the association's ladies' lunches anymore. Abigail tried to reinvent herself. My sin gave an interview crying, saying that it was all just a misunderstanding. The video went viral, but not in the way she expected. Her arrogance, the way she spoke of inferior people and maladjusted families, became a joke on the networks. Ryan lost his job at the office, his sponsorship, and with it, his mask. The surname Whitlock, which for years was synonymous with respect and prestige, has become synonymous with moral decadence. In cafes, people whispered, "Now," in the newspapers, the columnists spoke of the fall of a social dynasty, but I didn't celebrate. There was no pleasure in seeing anyone fall, even those who hurt us. I just felt relief, like someone who, after a long time fighting the wind, finally finds shelter. That night, I sat on the porch with Emily. The sky was clear, low. The moon lit up the yard, and the silence, for the first time, was beautiful. She looked at me and asked, "Mom, is it over?" I shook my head. What was a lie is over. No. The rest is now life. She leaned her head on my shoulder. And we stood there, quietly, listening to the sound of crickets and the light wind blowing against the trees. I thought about my times on the mat, the hard fights, the medals that today sleep in boxes. Life has taught me that strength is not in those who hit harder, but in those who hold on in silence until the right moment to get up. I didn't win with punches. I won calmly, with faith, with truth. And if you've been listening to my stories so far, keep something I've learned over the years. Justice may take time, but it is never lost. It just chooses the right moment to arrive. But I still didn't know that silence after the victory held a new sound, a sound that would come from the past. Because days later, a letter arrived in the mail, with an old handwriting and a sender I would never imagine seeing again. And what was written there, it would change everything. The letter arrived on a cold afternoon, one of those when the world seems to move in slow motion. The postman handed me the brown envelope with a quick smile. "There, sit you do what you like," without imagining what was inside. The sender said Harold Whitlock. My heart tightened. The former judge, the man who for so long believed he could control the truth like someone manipulating a verdict. I sat at the table on the one. I looked out the window. The snow was falling just like that on Christmas Eve that changed everything, and opened the envelope with steady hands. The handwriting was shaky, aged. "Mrs. Rose," he began, as if he still needed formality. "I don't write to justify what was done. I know that there is no possible defense. But there are nights when the sound of my conscience weighs more than any sentence I have ever uttered." I took a deep breath. The next words were a mixture of confession and remorse. He said that he knew about the manipulations, the transfers, the psychological abuse, but that the family needed to be protected. And by protecting the name, he had destroyed what was left of humanity within him. "Today, when I look in the mirror," he wrote, "I don't see a Whitlock. I see a man who let an innocent woman freeze in the snow, and there is no forgiveness that will give me back sleep." I folded the letter slowly and stood there, in silence, feeling that, meanwhile, I could do a coward chased. Somehow, that piece of paper ended a cycle that not even the justice of the court could close. Emily now wakes up early, soon. She prepares chamomile tea and sometimes sings softly while stirring the spoon in the cup. It's not the joy I dreamed of for her, but it's a beginning. There are days when her smile comes shy, and even so, it fills the apartment as if the sun came in through the window. Other times, I find her standing there, staring at nothing, lost in memories that still hurt. And I understand. Certain pains do not go away. They only learn to walk more slowly. From where I stand, sitting in the armchair by the window, I see the same kind of snow that covered the garden of the Whitlocks' house that night. Each flake that falls reminds me of time, because time is like this, frozen at first, then it turns into water, and in the end, it feeds the soil. I think about my years on the mat, the medals, the trips. I think about the times I left Emily with a nanny so I could train athletes in another state. For a long time, I thought that love was proven in what we achieved. Today I know that true love is proven in what we sustain. Sometimes I still wonder if I failed as a mother. We show a child. If she had been more present, oh, I was a not you too. Would Emily have chosen another kind of life? Would he have noticed the poison behind the smiles of that family earlier? But when I look at her now, alive, starting over, standing, I understand that. Even with all my mistakes, I did what a mother should do. I stayed, Mom. I stayed when it collapsed. I stayed when the whole world doubted. I stayed until the cold passed. That evening, after reading the letter, no, why, I put a blanket over my shoulders, grabbed 2 cups of tea, and went to the porch. Emily came after me, curious. I handed her the letter. She read it silently. Oh, Tony under your arm, so it hard. Her eyes watering. Then just said, he felt the weight. Mom, and and I replied, everyone does. One day, we stood there, watching the snow fall on the roof of the building, the flakes piling up. No, woes, calm me, as if they wanted to erase the footprints of the past. I realized, at that moment, that time did not break me. He shaped me. The wrinkles on my face are not marks of tiredness. They are trails of resistance. The loneliness I feared turned into wisdom. I no longer see myself as a mat fighter. Today, I see myself as a root, and a root does not move. Root sustains, and when I think about it, I also think of all the mothers who, like me, had to learn to be the ground when the world turned into a storm. Mothers who held children trembling, not only from cold, but from fear, pain, and shame. Mothers who listened in silence to the cruel laughter of those who never understood what real love is. Life, my dear, is not about winning every fight. It's about continuing to stand, even when the fight seems lost, because sometimes it's the simple act of staying that changes everything. But that night, as snow blanketed the streets of Boise, something told me that there was still one last thing to come. A reunion, an unexpected gesture, something that time had kept for me, and that, years later, would come knocking on my door, bringing the kind of peace I never imagined I would find. Do you want to know what it was? So stay with me, Mom, because what happened after that night was the quietest miracle of my life. It was cold, near, but it was fair. Sometimes, when the Boise wind blows stronger and the snow starts to cover the streets, I still remember the porch of that house, my daughter trembling in my arms, now trembling in my arms, and the sound of laughter inside. That was, without a doubt, the coldest night of my life, but also the most necessary, because it was there, between ice and silence, that I woke up. Today, now, so many years later, Walter, I can still feel the cold touch of Emily's skin, not through her body, but through the memory of what we were forced to go through. And somehow, the advantage hurt us was also what strengthened us. Emily now works at a women's support center in Boise. She meets others who, like her, have already felt invisible. Sometimes, when she comes home, she tells me stories of those who are trying to start over, and I listen in silence with a warm heart. Time healed, not in a hurry, but with patience. Ryan disappeared from town after the office fired him. It is said that he was seen in another state, trying to rebuild a life on the spotlight. Abigail sold the old family home and disappeared from the networks. Evelyn lives with a sister, Juan, and old Harold. Well, the judge retired for good and never set foot in a court again. Time, none, one way or another, was fair to each one. How I remain here, in the same modest apartment, watering my plants and watching the sunrise from the same window. Each morning, I see Emily walk through the kitchen and smile, not the smile of someone who has forgotten the pain, but the smile of someone who has learned to live with it. And that's how life should be, my dear. Not an absence of wounds, but the courage to continue, even with the scars. Yo, I learned that forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It's just deciding that it doesn't rule us anymore. I didn't forgive the Whitlocks because they deserved it. I forgave because I deserved to rest. I also learned that a woman's strength is not in the scream or in the physical struggle. It is in the calm that comes after the storm. It is in faith that refuses to die. It is in love that, even wounded, it chooses to stay. And now, Milu, if you've heard me this far, I want to thank you from the heart. Telling this story is not easy, but it is beautiful to know that there is someone on the other side listening to me carefully. Maybe having a coffee, maybe remembering something similar. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. And if this story touched you in any way, leave a like for me. Yeah, I'm not saying that. Like a hug that warms you up on cold days. And if you want to keep coming here for us to have another coffee and talk more, subscribe to the channel. It's my way of always leaving the door open for when you want to come back. Also tell me where you are watching me from, which city, which corner of this world you are listening to me now. I love imagining how far these stories travel. And if you can, activate the bell so you don't lose it when the coffee is brewed again. Time has taught me that each fight leaves a lesson, and each story we carry has the power to ignite someone's. I look back and see that, without even realizing it, I turned into a bridge between cold and time, between fear and courage, because a mother's love, he never retires. Don't go away yet. I must see you. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.